The space station floated in the darkness near a blue star. It was a big metal circle with lights on every level. This station had one job. It kept rare animals safe. Animals from dying planets came here. The people who worked here tried to save them. Director Crathnor stood at his office window. He was tall with shiny scales that changed colors. Right now his scales were dark gray. That meant he was worried. He looked down at the animal pens below. In one pen, 12 young creatures were going wild. Behind him, Dr. Seleth walked back and forth. She had 4 arms and she waved all of them as she talked. Her voice was high and fast. Director, we have a big problem. The Carvax babies are getting worse every day. They hurt 3 workers yesterday. All 3 are in the medical room now. We tried every animal expert in this part of space. Nobody can control them. Crathnor turned away from the window. His face showed his worry. The Carvax came from a planet with very strong gravity. They were the top hunters on their world. Nothing ate them. They ate everything else. Their planet had been destroyed when their sun exploded. These 12 babies were the only ones left. If they died, the whole species would be gone forever. But nobody expected them to be this hard to handle. The babies were already huge. Each one was as big as a small car. They had 6 legs with claws that could cut through metal. Their teeth could bite through the strongest materials. And they listened to no one. What about those Thorian pack leaders? Crathnor asked. The Thorians were famous for training wild animals. If anyone could help, it should be them. Seleth made a sad noise. They said no. The head trainer said the Carvax babies do not follow any rules. He said they are pure chaos. He will not go near them again. The director's scales turned darker. This was very bad news. The babies needed training. They needed to learn how to live with others. They needed to be safe enough to put back on a protected planet someday. But right now they were too dangerous. They fought each other. They broke everything. They attacked anyone who came close. At 6 months old, they should still be learning. Instead, they were destroying their pen and hurting people. In a few more months, they would be even bigger. Even stronger. Even more dangerous. There is one more person we could try, Seleth said. She spoke slowly, like she was not sure this was a good idea. The human? Crathnor could not hide his doubt. Humans were new to space. They only learned to travel between stars a few decades ago. Their planet was dangerous. Very dangerous. So humans were tough. But tough enough for this? He did not think so. Her name is Claire Bennett. She works in our science department. She studies alien animals. Her file says she worked with dangerous hunters on her home planet. Big cats called lions. Large furry things called bears. Water reptiles called crocodiles. All of them could kill humans easily. But she trained them anyway. Crathnor looked at his computer. He pulled up Claire Bennett's information. A picture appeared. The human looked back at him. She had brown hair tied behind her head. She looked so small, so weak. The Carvax babies would crush her without trying. This seems like a good way to kill our only human worker, he said quietly. She asked to try, sir. She said the Carvax sound like big puppies with bad behavior. Those were her exact words. Crathnor did not like this idea, but they had no other options. He agreed to meet with the human. 1 hour later, Claire Bennett walked into his office. She was even smaller in person. She wore the standard work uniform, but she had added thick gloves. She carried an old bag over her shoulder. Director Crathnor, she said. She held out her hand. This was how humans greeted each other. He carefully touched her hand with one claw. Her bones felt so thin. He could break them so easily. The Carvax babies could do much worse, Ms. Bennett. Thank you for coming. But I must tell you the truth. These creatures are very dangerous. They have hurt our best animal handlers. They do not respect anyone. They do not fear punishment. They do not want to cooperate. Why do you think you can do what others could not? Claire smiled. It was a confident smile, almost amused. With respect, sir, I think your handlers are doing it wrong. I watched the video recordings. Everyone tries to dominate the babies. They try to force them to obey through strength or fear. And that is wrong because? Seleth asked. She sounded confused. Because they are babies, Claire said. Her voice was simple and clear. Yes, they are dangerous babies, but they are still babies. They do not need someone to beat them into submission. They do not need a master. They need a teacher. Someone who sets rules. Someone who gives them structure. Someone who earns their respect by being fair and consistent. Crathnor looked at Seleth. The doctor looked back at him. The idea seemed crazy. These were apex predators, the most dangerous type of animal. You could not just teach them like children. Could you? But something in Claire's eyes made him pause. She was not joking. She was not being foolish. She truly believed this would work. Fine, he said at last. You can try, but we will watch you every second. Security will be ready to pull you out if anything goes wrong. Claire shook her head. No, you need to call off the security team when I go inside. The babies will sense their fear and aggression. That will ruin everything I am trying to do. That is not acceptable. It is too dangerous. Then it will not work, Claire said. Her voice was firm now, strong. You either trust me or you find someone else. Your choice. Silence filled the office. Krathnor did not like being given orders by someone so small and young, but he had no other options. All the experts had failed. Maybe this human's crazy idea was their last chance. Very well, he said slowly. But if something goes wrong, it will be on your head. Understood, Claire said. She smiled again. That same confident smile. When can I start? Tomorrow morning, Seleth said. That gives us time to prepare the medical team. Just in case, Claire nodded. That is fine. I need to prepare too. I need to make some special food treats. I need to get the right tools. And I need to watch more video of the babies. I want to learn their personalities before I meet them. She stood up to leave. At the door, she turned back. Director, I know you think this is crazy. I know you think I will fail, but I have one advantage that your other experts did not have. And what is that? Krathnor asked. I come from a death world. Earth is one of the most dangerous planets in known space. I grew up surrounded by creatures that wanted to eat me. Creatures with venom. Creatures with claws. Creatures with teeth. Every human child learns to read animals. We learn to understand them. We learn to work with them instead of against them. That is how we survived long enough to reach the stars. She paused at the door. These Carvax babies are dangerous, yes. But I have seen dangerous before. And I know one thing that your experts do not seem to understand. What is that? Seleth asked. Every creature, no matter how dangerous, wants three things. They want food. They want safety. And they want to belong to something. Give them those three things with clear rules and consistent behavior, and they will follow you anywhere. With that, she left. The door closed behind her. Krathnor and Seleth sat in silence for a long moment. She is either the bravest person I have ever met, Seleth said slowly, or the most foolish. Perhaps both, Krathnor replied. He looked out the window again at the Carvax pen. The babies were fighting over food, breaking things, making chaos. But she is right about one thing. We have no other choice. If she fails, we will have to put the babies down, and that will be the end of the Carvax species forever. That night, Claire worked late in her small apartment on the station. She mixed protein blocks into special treats. She tested different sounds on her whistle. She watched hours of video footage learning each baby's unique patterns and behaviors. She was not afraid. Fear would not help her. Instead, she felt excited. These creatures were magnificent, powerful, intelligent. They just needed someone who understood them, someone who could show them that structure did not mean losing their wild nature. It meant channeling it in better ways. As she fell asleep, she thought about the 12 Carvax babies. Tomorrow she would meet them face to face. Tomorrow she would show them that a teacher could be more powerful than any master. Tomorrow she would prove that even the wildest heart could learn. She just hoped she was right. The animal holding area was in the lower part of the station. The walls there were extra strong. They had to be. The Carvax babies could break through normal walls easily. As Claire walked down the metal hallways, she could hear them. Roaring, crashing, the sounds echoed like thunder through the corridors. Dr. Seleth walked beside her. The doctor's forearms were full of computer tablets and emergency papers. She looked very worried. Are you sure about this? We could start by just watching them through the window. You do not have to go inside right away. Claire checked her bag. Inside were protein treats she had made. A small whistle, a metal tube that made loud sounds, a water bottle. Everything she needed. Watching through glass will not build trust, Claire said. The longer we wait, the worse their behavior will get. Bad habits become harder to fix over time. They stopped at a big window. Through it, Claire could see the pen. It was huge. The floor had been made to feel like their home planet with its heavy gravity. There were rocks to climb, deep pools of water, thick plants everywhere. And in the middle of it all, complete chaos. 12 Carvax babies were causing mayhem. 2 fought over a piece of meat. Their growls were deep and frightening. 3 others were destroying an expensive climbing structure. It was already broken into pieces. The rest were doing various destructive things, climbing on things they should not, marking territory on equipment, roaring at nothing. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Dark fur covered their bodies. Each one had unique stripe patterns. Muscles moved under their coats like steel cables. They had 6 powerful legs. Each leg ended in claws that could cut metal. Their heads had forward-facing eyes like all hunters. Long whiskers twitched constantly, sensing everything around them. Their tails were thick and strong. One swing could break bones. Last chance to change your mind, Celeste said. Her voice showed she hoped Claire would do exactly that. Claire took a deep breath. She stood up straight. She smiled. Let me in. The airlock door made a hissing sound as it opened. Claire stepped through. The moment her feet touched the pen floor, every single baby stopped what they were doing. All 12 heads turned to stare at her. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Claire stood completely still. She made no threatening moves. She just looked at them as they looked at her. Her heart was beating fast. She could feel adrenaline pumping through her body, but she kept breathing slowly. She kept her body relaxed. Then the biggest baby, the one who had been fighting over meat, let out a roar that shook her chest, and it charged straight at her. In the observation room, Crathnor got ready to hit the emergency button. But Claire did not run. She did not freeze in fear. Instead, she pulled out the metal tube from her bag. It was an air horn from the station's safety equipment. She pointed it at the charging baby and pressed the button. The blast of sound was incredibly loud. The baby stopped running immediately. Confusion replaced its aggression. It sat down hard. All 6 legs spread out. It tried to understand what had just happened. No, Claire said firmly. Her voice was clear and strong. She pointed one finger at the baby. She looked directly into its eyes. We do not charge at people. The baby tilted its huge head. Its whiskers twitched. Then, maybe because nobody had ever spoken to it with such calm authority before, or maybe because the loud noise had surprised it, the baby stayed sitting. Claire waited 3 full seconds. Then she took out one of her protein treats and tossed it to the baby. It caught the treat without thinking. After a moment, it ate the treat. Good, Claire said warmly. That is very good. She turned to face the rest of the babies. They were watching this with what looked like fascination. Slowly and deliberately, she walked to the center of the pen. Then she sat down on the ground with her legs crossed. All right, everyone, she said. Her voice carried that same firm but gentle tone. New rules. When I sit, you sit. When I stand, you pay attention. When you do good things, you get treats. When you do bad things, you get this. She held up the air horn. Understood? Obviously, they did not understand her words, but something in her body language spoke to them. Something in her tone. Something in her complete lack of fear mixed with total confidence. It cut through their wild energy. One by one, the babies began to calm down. Their aggressive postures softened. They looked curious now instead of angry. One of the smaller babies took a small step forward. Its fur was lighter than the others. Claire stayed still. She let it approach on its own terms. The baby came closer. Its whiskers trembled as it smelled the air around her. Then it did something that made everyone watching hold their breath. It sat down about 3 meters away from her. Excellent, Claire praised. She tossed the baby a treat. That broke the spell. Suddenly all 12 babies wanted treats. They rushed forward together. Fur and claws everywhere. For a moment it seemed like Claire would be crushed. But she stood up quickly. She held up the air horn. She shouted, "Sit!" The babies stopped running so fast they crashed into each other. There was chaos as they bumped and stumbled. But they stopped. Claire waited, patient, unmoving. Slowly, first one baby, then another, then all of them sat down. The sight was almost funny. 12 massive predators sat in a rough half-circle around one small human. Each baby could tear apart most species easily, but they sat there like puppies waiting for dinner. Claire walked down the line. She gave each baby a treat and a moment of attention. She looked at their markings. Their personalities were already showing. Some took treats gently, others grabbed eagerly. One tried to take 2 treats. Claire firmly said no and moved on without giving it any. In the observation room, Crathnor and Selith stared in complete silence. Their mouths hung open. "How is she doing that?" Selith whispered. "I have no idea," Crathnor replied. His scales had turned a color that meant he was deeply confused. Claire spent the next hour working with the babies. She did simple exercises: sit, stay, come here, stop. Each command was clear. Each response got a reward if it was correct. No response or wrong response got nothing. Sometimes the air horn if they tried to do something dangerous. The babies learned fast, much faster than anyone expected. By the end of the first session, they would sit on command. They would stay in place when told. They would come when called, though their version of coming was still more like a controlled stampede than a calm walk. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress. When Claire finally left the pen, she was covered in dirt and fur. She had scratches on her arms from when one baby got too excited. She was exhausted, but she was smiling. Crathnor met her at the door. "That was incredible. I have never seen anything like it." "How did you do it?" Claire shrugged. "They are smart. Much smarter than anyone gave them credit for. They were acting out because they had no structure. No rules, no understanding of what was expected. They were scared and confused. That made them aggressive." "Scared?" Selith asked. "Those creatures are afraid of nothing. Everything gets scared when it does not understand its world," Claire said. "They lost their planet, their parents, everything they knew. Then they were put in this strange place with no guidance. Of course they acted out. It was the only way they knew to express their fear and confusion." She looked back through the window. The babies were calmer now. They were not fighting. They were not breaking things. They were eating their dinner peacefully. "Give me 2 weeks," Claire said. 2 weeks and I will have them behaving like trained students. 1 month and they will be the best behaved predators you have ever seen." Crathnor wanted to argue. This seemed impossible, but he had just watched the impossible happen. So instead he just nodded. "You have your 2 weeks. But if anything changes, if they become dangerous again, we pull you out immediately." "Fair enough," Claire agreed. Over the next few days, word spread through the station. The human had tamed the untamable Carvax babies. Scientists found excuses to walk past the observation windows. They wanted to see it for themselves, and what they saw amazed them. Every morning, Claire entered the pen. Every morning, the babies would already be sitting and waiting for her. She worked with them for hours, teaching, guiding, correcting, praising, and they responded. By day 3, they knew their names. Claire had named each one. The biggest one was Duke. The light-furred one was Scout. There were 2 that always moved together. She called them River and Brook. Each baby had a name that fit its personality. By day 5, they would line up in order when she whistled. By day 7, they were doing complex exercises that required thinking and cooperation. By day 10, they looked less like wild monsters and more like a disciplined team. The most amazing change was in how they treated Claire. These massive predators, each one capable of killing her easily, moved around her with exaggerated care. When they played rough with each other, they were still rough. But around Claire they were gentle. So gentle that it seemed impossible creatures so large and powerful could be so careful. One day, Duke accidentally knocked Claire down during an excited greeting. He froze immediately. His whiskers drooped. His ears went flat. He looked distressed. Somehow he understood he had hurt his teacher. And he was sorry. Claire picked herself up. She checked that nothing was broken. Then she sat Duke down. For 5 full minutes she talked to him in a serious voice. She explained why we must be careful with friends. Why strength means nothing if we cannot see the days turned into weeks. Claire came to the pen every morning at the same time. The airlock made a specific hissing sound when it opened. The babies learned to recognize that sound. By the end of the first month, they would already be sitting in a line when she walked in. Well, their version of a line. It was messy at first, more like a crowd that sort of suggested a line shape. But it was progress. Real progress. Claire had given all 12 babies names. She used simple names she could call out clearly. Duke was the biggest. He had made himself the leader of the group. Claire worked with his natural leadership instead of fighting it. When Duke learned something, the others copied him. Scout was the light-furred baby who had been first to sit down. She was curious and gentle, often the first to try new things. River and Brook were twins who did everything together. They moved in perfect sync. Tank was the heaviest and slowest. but he was surprisingly patient. Bolt had lightning-fast reactions and could never sit still for long. Shadow preferred to watch from the back before trying anything new. The others were Spark, Storm, Echo, Nova, and Ash. Each had their own personality, their own quirks, their own challenges. Claire learned them all. She changed her teaching style for each individual baby, while keeping the overall rules the same for everyone. The training was basic, but effective. Sit meant sit, stay meant do not move, come meant approach calmly, not charge like a freight ship. No meant stop whatever you are doing right now. Good meant treats were coming, but training was not just about commands. Claire spent hours each day simply being present with them, teaching them how to exist in a structured world. She introduced games that challenged their minds and their bodies, puzzle feeders that required cooperation, obstacle courses that needed patience and precision, social exercises that helped them learn to play without hurting anyone. The hardest lesson was teaching them to control their strength. Carvax babies did not naturally understand the concept of gentle. Their play on their home planet would have involved full-contact fighting that would kill most species. Claire had to show them through countless patient corrections that not every interaction required maximum force. The breakthrough came in week 3. Duke knocked Claire down during an excited greeting. It was an accident. He was just happy to see her. But before she could even react, Duke froze. His whiskers drooped in distress. He had hurt his teacher, and somehow through all of Claire's consistent training he understood that was wrong. Claire picked herself up. She checked that nothing was broken. Then she sat Duke down for what the watching staff called the lecture. For 5 full minutes she talked to him in a low, serious voice. She explained why we must be careful with our friends, why strength means nothing if we cannot control it, why being big means we have to be gentle. Duke sat through the entire lecture with his head bowed low. His ears were flat against his skull. A creature that could eat her in 2 bites sat there looking ashamed. When she finally said okay and gave him a small treat, he took it so gently that her fingers never even touched his teeth. From that day forward, all the babies seemed to understand restraint. They still played roughly with each other. That was their nature. But around Claire, they moved with exaggerated care, as if she were made of the most delicate glass. Word of the human's success spread throughout the station. Scientists from other departments found excuses to walk past the observation windows. They watched in amazement as the supposedly uncontrollable Carvax babies responded to Claire's whistles and commands like well-trained soldiers. The most impressive demonstration came when Director Crathnor decided to watch a training session in person. He arrived during what Claire called formation practice. He stood at the viewport and watched. Claire entered the pen. The 12 babies were scattered throughout the space. They were doing various activities, playing, climbing, swimming. Then Claire blew a specific pattern on her whistle, 3 short bursts. Immediately, all 12 babies stopped what they were doing. They moved to the center of the pen. Within 30 seconds, they had arranged themselves in 2 perfect lines of 6, sitting at attention. Tails curled neatly around their front paws. Duke sat at the front of the left line. Scout at the front of the right. The size order was perfect. Largest to smallest. Claire walked slowly down the lines. She inspected each baby. Here and there, she would adjust a posture with a gentle touch, or give a quiet word of correction. When she reached the end, she turned to face them all. Class, she said clearly. Crathnor realized she was treating these apex predators like students in a school. Today we are going to practice cooperative hunting techniques. This is important. When you are older, you will need to work together to survive. Can anyone tell me why cooperation is important? Obviously, they could not answer with words. But Duke raised one massive paw, like he had seen Claire do when asking questions. Good, Duke. Yes, cooperation is important because we are stronger together than alone. When we work as a team, we can accomplish things that would be impossible by ourselves. She ran them through a complex exercise. It involved multiple moving targets, strategic positioning, careful timing. The babies executed the exercise with focus and precision that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. When the session ended, Claire had all 12 babies sit in a circle around her. She went to each one individually. She checked their paws for injuries, their teeth for problems, their ears for parasites. It was a medical inspection disguised as affection, and the babies submitted to it peacefully. They even leaned into her touch. Dismissed, she finally said. She blew a different pattern on her whistle. The babies dispersed. But instead of returning to chaos, they engaged in calm, organized play. They had learned structure. And more importantly, they had learned that structure did not mean losing their wild nature. It meant channeling it productively. Crathnor found himself shaking his head in disbelief. He turned to Seleth, who had joined him at the viewport. "How?" he asked. "How is this possible?" "I have been studying her methods," Seleth replied. She pulled up data on her tablet. "It is fascinating. She uses what she calls positive reinforcement mixed with clear boundaries. She never punishes them for being predators, only for being dangerous. She rewards them not just for obedience but for thinking, for showing restraint, for being gentle despite their strength. But how did she establish dominance? She is smaller than they are. Weaker by every physical measure. That is just it, Director. She did not establish dominance. She established trust. The babies do not obey her because they fear her. They obey her because they respect her, because she is consistent, because she keeps them safe, because she makes them better versions of themselves." Crathnor watched as Claire sat with the babies. All 12 were now crowded around her in a protective circle. They competed for her attention with gentle pushes and soft rumbles. The rumbles were their version of purring. "She is not their master," he said slowly. Understanding was dawning on him. "She is their teacher, their protector, their mother," Seleth finished. "In every way that matters, she has become their mother." The word hung in the air. It was true. Claire had not just trained the babies. She had bonded with them. She had filled the role left empty when their real parents died. She gave them structure, safety, and something they desperately needed, someone who cared about them. Over the following weeks, the training continued. The babies grew bigger, stronger, but they also grew calmer, more disciplined, more thoughtful. They learned complex commands. They learned to work together on difficult tasks. They learned that their strength was a tool to be used carefully, not a weapon to be deployed constantly. Claire introduced new challenges regularly. She made obstacle courses that required teamwork. She created puzzles that needed problem solving. She set up scenarios where they had to choose between immediate gratification and long-term rewards, and they passed every test. The station's other animal programs began to take notice. Trainers who had been struggling with their own charges started asking Claire for advice. She was happy to share her methods, but she always emphasized the same key points. You cannot force an intelligent creature to obey through fear or pain. You have to make them want to cooperate. Give them clear rules. Be consistent. Reward good behavior. Correct bad behavior immediately but without anger. Treat them like thinking beings, not like machines. Some trainers understood. Others thought she was being too soft, too gentle, but the results spoke for themselves. The Carvax babies, once considered hopeless cases, were now model animals. They followed commands. They showed restraint. They demonstrated intelligence and cooperation that exceeded all expectations. By the end of the second month, even the most skeptical observers had to admit the truth. The human had achieved something remarkable. She had taken 12 wild, dangerous predators and taught them to be civilized without breaking their spirits. One evening, Crathnor found Claire sitting outside the pen. She was watching the babies through the window. They were settling down for sleep. They had arranged themselves in a pile, all 12 bodies intertwined for warmth and comfort. It was peaceful. Content. "You have done something incredible," Crathnor said. News of Claire's success reached the Galactic Council within 2 months. The Carvax, once considered a lost cause, were now thriving. More importantly, they were socialized enough that the Conservation Institute could begin planning for their eventual return to a protected habitat planet. But the Council wanted proof. They sent evaluator Zenthar. She was a Carillion assessment specialist. Everyone knew her harsh standards and skeptical nature. She had shut down more conservation programs than she had approved. She arrived at the station with a reputation that preceded her like a storm. Claire met her in Director Crathnor's office. She sat through an hour of pointed questions and barely concealed doubt. Genthar's crystalline features reflected the office lights in sharp angles. Her voice was cold and cutting. "Ms. Bennett," Genthar said, "I have reviewed the recordings. They are impressive. I will grant you that. But parlor tricks and controlled demonstrations are not the same as genuine behavioral change. These are apex predators. Their nature is violence. One day that nature will reassert itself, and someone will die. With respect, evaluator, Claire replied evenly. You are operating under a false assumption. The baby's nature is not violence. Violence is a tool they use to survive, just like their claws or their teeth. What I have taught them is that they can choose when and how to use that tool. They are not robots programmed to never show aggression. They are intelligent beings who understand context and consequence. Prove it, Genthar challenged. I want to see how they react to a real threat. Not you with your treats and whistles. I want to see an actual dangerous situation, Krathenor interrupted. That would be extremely dangerous. We cannot risk it. I will do it, Claire said quietly. But on my terms. I choose the scenario. I choose the parameters. Genthar's expression suggested she thought Claire was bluffing. Agreed. 2 days later, the demonstration was ready. Claire had designed a scenario that would test everything she had taught the babies. Restraint, teamwork, the ability to tell real threats from fake ones. And most importantly, trust. The observation gallery was packed. News of the evaluation had spread throughout the station. Everyone wanted to see whether the human's miracle would hold up under scrutiny, whether the babies would remain calm or revert to their violent nature. Claire entered the pen alone. The babies, now 4 months into their training, immediately formed their line formation without being commanded. They sensed the tension in the air. They sensed the presence of many watchers. They had defaulted to the structure she had taught them. Good morning, class, she said. Her voice carried that familiar calm authority. Today we have visitors. They want to see how much you have learned. Are you ready to show them? 12 heads nodded in eerie synchronization. Claire smiled, though her heart was pounding. She had confidence in her babies. But this was a risk. A real, genuine risk. She gave a hand signal. The pen's secondary airlock opened. Through it came a security robot. It was programmed with combat protocols. It had weapons that could hurt but not kill. The robot's appearance was designed to trigger predator instincts. It moved with jerky, aggressive motions. It made threatening sounds. Every baby tensed immediately. Duke's lips pulled back in a snarl. His teeth could shred steel. Scout dropped into a hunting crouch. The twins moved to flank the threat automatically. All 12 were seconds away from attacking. Claire raised one hand. Wait, they waited. Every muscle quivering with the need to attack. Every instinct screaming at them to eliminate the threat. But they waited. The robot advanced. Its programming was set to approach Claire. It moved between her and the babies. It blocked their line of sight to their teacher. Duke let out a warning roar that shook the observation gallery's windows. Wait, Claire repeated, and incredibly they did. The robot reached Claire. It extended an arm toward her. It simulated trying to grab her. Before it could touch her, she said clearly, Duke, remove the threat gently. Duke moved faster than most observers could track. 600 kilograms of apex predator crossed the distance in a heartbeat, but instead of tearing into the robot with claws and fangs, he carefully gripped it with his mouth. He carried it to the far side of the pen. He set it down with exaggerated care. Then he returned to his position. The robot was undamaged except for some saliva. It rebooted and began to advance again. Claire gave a different signal. A specific whistle pattern. This time all 12 babies moved as one. They surrounded the robot in a perfect circle. Shoulder to shoulder. They created a living barrier between it and Claire. Their message was clear. You cannot reach our teacher, but they did not attack. They simply stood there. An impenetrable wall of fur and muscle and carefully controlled aggression. Claire let it continue for exactly 30 seconds. Then she blew a different pattern. Immediately the babies backed away. They returned to their formation. They sat calmly as if they had not just been seconds away from defensive violence. She deactivated the robot with a remote control. Then she turned to face the observation gallery. She looked directly at where she knew Genthar was watching. You wanted to see how they respond to a threat, she said. Her voice transmitted through the intercom. They respond exactly as they should. They protect what they care about. But they do not respond with mindless violence. They discriminate. They show restraint. They wait for guidance. These are not violent monsters. They are intelligent beings who understand that sometimes strength means choosing not to fight. She walked to Duke. She placed her hand on his massive head. No fear in her touch. Every single one of these babies could kill me in seconds. They know it. I know it. But they will not, because they understand something that most people do not. True strength is not about what you can destroy. It is about what you choose to protect. In the observation gallery, Genthar stood silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Director Crathnor. "I have never seen anything like this," she admitted. "In 200 years of evaluating conservation programs across the galaxy, I have never seen this level of behavioral modification in apex predators. It should not be possible." "But it is possible," Crathnor replied. "Because of her." Genthar watched as Claire conducted a cool-down session with the babies. She praised each one individually for their restraint and control. They soaked up her approval like starving creatures at a feast. "The Carvax conservation program is approved," Genthar said finally. "But I have one condition. The human must continue working with them until they are ready for reintroduction. This success is dependent on her methods, her presence, her understanding of how to bridge the gap between wild nature and socialized behavior." "I do not think that will be a problem," Crathnor said. There was amusement in his voice. "I do not think anything short of a supernova could separate her from those babies now." He was right. After the evaluation, Claire's bond with the babies only grew stronger. She spent even more time with them, teaching advanced lessons, preparing them for the day when they would leave the station and go to their new home. The babies continued to grow. They were now the size of large vehicles. Their strength had increased dramatically. By all rights, they should have become harder to manage. Adolescence for predators usually meant increased aggression, territorial behavior, challenges to authority. But the Carvax babies remained calm, disciplined, respectful. They tested boundaries occasionally, as all young creatures do, but they accepted correction. They understood rules. They chose cooperation over conflict. Claire introduced new challenges regularly. She made them work for their food instead of just giving it to them. She created scenarios where they had to problem solve. She taught them to hunt simulated prey using teamwork and strategy instead of just brute force. She also taught them something unexpected: empathy. When one baby was hurt during rough play, the others learned to stop and check on their injured companion. When Tank got sick for a few days, the others brought him food and lay beside him for comfort. They were developing bonds that went beyond simple pack behavior. They were becoming a family. Scientists from across the galaxy began requesting to visit the station. They wanted to see the miracle for themselves. They wanted to learn Claire's methods. She welcomed them all. She explained her philosophy patiently to everyone who asked. "It is not complicated," she would say. "Treat them like intelligent beings. Set clear rules. Be consistent. Reward good choices. Correct bad choices immediately but without anger. And most importantly, show them that you care about their well-being. They will follow someone they trust far more readily than someone they fear." Some visitors understood. Others remained skeptical. But nobody could argue with the results. The Carvax babies were living proof that even the most dangerous predators could learn, could grow, could become more than just violent instinct. One evening, after all the visitors had left, Claire sat outside the pen watching the babies settle down for the night. They had developed a routine. They would play roughly for a while, burning off excess energy. Then they would all go to the water pool and wash themselves. Then they would arrange themselves in their sleeping pile, Duke always at the center, the others arranged around him in a specific order that never varied. Crathnor joined her at the window. They sat in comfortable silence for a W. Heil, just watching the babies, their steady breathing. Their P2 years after Claire first walked into the Carvax pen, the babies had grown into young adults. They were now truly massive. Each one was larger than a ground transport vehicle. Their strength could tear through reinforced hulls. By all rights, they should have been unmanageable. Their adolescent hormones and growing power should have combined into something lethal. Instead, they remained the most well-behaved predators in the galaxy. Claire's methods had been studied and documented. They had been attempted on other species throughout the Conservation Institute's network. With varying degrees of success, her principles were being applied to creatures that had once been considered impossible to work with. The concept of teaching rather than dominating was changing xenobiological conservation across the galaxy, but nothing matched the original success. Nothing compared to what Claire had built with her 12 students. Today was a special day. The habitat world that had been prepared for the Carvax was finally ready. It was a protected preserve with monitored borders. The environmental conditions matched their original homeworld. It was time for the babies, no longer babies but not quite fully adult, to begin the next phase of their lives. Claire stood in the pen one final time. She was surrounded by her students. They knew something was different. Perhaps they sensed it in her emotions, or maybe they understood more than anyone gave them credit for. But they were quieter than usual. Their massive bodies pressed close to her in a protective circle. "I am so proud of you," she told them. Her voice was thick with emotion she did not try to hide. "When I first met you, everyone said you were impossible. Too wild, too dangerous, too chaotic. But I knew better. I knew you were not impossible. You just needed someone to believe in you, to give you structure and purpose and love." Duke, now nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, lowered his head to rest it gently against her shoulder. The movement was so careful, so controlled. It was hard to remember this was a creature capable of bringing down prey 10 times its size. "Where you are going, you will not need me anymore," Claire continued. "You will have a whole world to explore, to make your own. You will hunt real prey. You will raise families. You will be what you were always meant to be." Wild and free and magnificent, she pulled back. She looked at each of them in turn. Scout, whose curiosity had never faded. River and Brook, who even now moved in perfect synchronization. Tank, patient and solid. Bolt, with reflexes that still surprised her. Shadow, watchful and wise. Spark, Storm, Echo, Nova, Ash. Each one unique, each one precious. "But I need you to remember something," she said firmly. She was using her teacher voice now. "What you learned here, you take with you. Not the commands, not the formations. Those were just tools to teach you the real lesson. The real lesson is this. You are powerful, yes, but power without control is meaningless. You are predators, yes, but that does not mean you cannot choose mercy. You are wild, yes, but you can be wild and still be kind to each other, still work together, still build something better than simple survival." She stepped back. She blew one final whistle pattern, one they had practiced countless times but never fully understood until now. It was the pattern for goodbye. The 12 Carvax, the last of their kind, formed their perfect double line one final time. They sat at attention, every eye on their teacher, waiting for the last lesson. "Class dismissed," Claire said. Her voice broke slightly. "Go be amazing." They did not move at first. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Duke stood. He walked to Claire. Very gently, he touched his nose to her forehead. It was a gesture he had invented months ago. His way of saying thank you. One by one, the others followed, each taking their turn to say goodbye in their own way. Scout pressed her whole head against Claire's chest. River and Brook flanked her, creating a shelter with their bodies. Tank simply sat beside her, solid and present. The others each had their moment. Their gesture, their farewell. Then, with a discipline that still amazed everyone watching, they turned and walked toward the transport that would take them to their new home. They walked in formation, Duke at the lead, exactly as Claire had taught them. Not because they had to, but because it reminded them of who they were, what they had learned, and the small human who had believed in them when no one else would. Claire watched them go. Tears streamed freely down her face. Director Crathnor approached. He placed a careful claw on her shoulder. "You have given them an incredible gift," he said softly. "You have given them a future." "They gave me something too," Claire replied. She wiped her eyes. "They taught me that intelligence and compassion are not limited by species, that even the most fearsome predator can choose gentleness. That being wild does not mean being cruel." She turned to look at the director. A smile broke through her tears. "Besides, this is not really goodbye. We will monitor them, check on them. I will visit when I can. And who knows, maybe in a few years they will have babies of their own. And I will get to teach a whole new generation that being a predator and being civilized are not mutually exclusive." Months later, the reports from the habitat world exceeded all expectations. The Carvax had adapted perfectly to their new environment. They hunted. They established territories. They behaved like the apex predators they were meant to be. But there were differences that fascinated the researchers monitoring them. They cooperated in ways wild Carvax never had, according to the historical records. They showed restraint when dealing with the monitoring equipment and research stations. They appeared to be teaching younger cubs, babies born in the habitat, behaviors that emphasized cooperation and controlled aggression. And sometimes, when the wind was right and the moons were full, the watchers would report hearing a sound that sent chills down their spines. 12 distinct calls, harmonizing in a pattern that sounded almost like singing. They called it the evening formation, though no one could quite explain why 12 apex predators would sit in perfect lines at sunset and call out in sequence before beginning their nightly activities. But Claire understood. She listened to the recordings and smiled. She recognized the rhythm of the whistle patterns she had used, now translated into their own language. They had not forgotten. They were passing on what they had learned, not as tricks or commands, but as culture. The story of the human who tamed the untamable spread throughout the galaxy. It became legend, then myth, then eventually a case study taught in every xenobiology program across civilized space. No one could control the predator babies until the human entered, and they lined up like students. Not through dominance or force or fear, but through something far more powerful. Patience, understanding, and the unwavering belief that even the wildest heart could learn, could grow, could choose to be more than just instinct and teeth. And in doing so, Claire Bennett had not just saved a species from extinction. She had proven something that the galaxy desperately needed to understand. That strength tempered with compassion, that wildness combined with wisdom, that nature guided by nurture. These things could create something more beautiful than either could achieve alone. The last of the Carvacs were not last anymore. They were first. The beginning of a new era, an era where predators and people could coexist, not through domination or fear, but through mutual respect and understanding. All because one human decided that maybe, just maybe, the babies did not need to be controlled. They needed to be taught, and there was all the difference in the world. Years passed. The Carvacs population grew. The original 12 had families of their own. Their children learned the lessons passed down from their parents: cooperation, restraint, gentleness with those smaller and weaker. These traits became part of Carvacs culture. Scientists studying the population noticed something remarkable. The new generation of Carvacs were different from what the historical records described. They were still apex predators, still powerful and dangerous, but they showed more social cohesion, more complex communication, more nuanced decision-making. They had evolved beyond simple survival. They were building a society. Claire visited the habitat world regularly. Each time she arrived, Duke would be waiting at the landing site. Now fully grown, he was an imposing figure, 3.5 meters at the shoulder, muscles like coiled springs, claws that could cut through anything. But when he saw Claire, he would lower his massive head. He would make the soft, rumbling sound that was his version of a purr, and he would gently touch his nose to her forehead. "Thank you," the gesture said. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for showing me that I could be more than just a monster." And Claire would rest her hand on his head, this creature who could kill her so easily, and she would whisper, "You were always more. You just needed someone to show you how." One day, Claire brought a group of young xenobiology students to the habitat. They wanted to see the famous Carvacs. They wanted to meet the human who had accomplished the impossible. They stood at the safe viewing area, watching the pride of Carvacs through reinforced barriers. "How did you do it?" one student asked. "How did you tame them?" Claire smiled. "I did not tame them. Taming implies breaking their spirit, making them something they are not. I taught them. There is a difference. But what was your secret, fool?